It's worth playing a section of Keir Starmer's news broadcast today, press conference, which begins with Natalie Elphicke and then goes on to make it quite clear that Natalie Elphicke is not going to be standing in Dover for the next election. And then Keir Starmer, in his speech, talks about the stupidity of the Conservative initiatives under people like Suella Braverman and Priti Patel and Theresa May and Jenrick, trying to create a hostile environment for immigrants. It doesn't work. The deterrent of Rwanda doesn't work. He's not going to accept it, and so on. I'm only going to play a small part of the speech because my own Wi-Fi let me down here, but I think it gives a really good flavour of what Keir Starmer is proposing, and it must be better than the Conservative position. I don't think it's enough. I think without international leverage, without re-looking at the commitments that were made in the 1951 Refugee Convention, we cannot cherry pick what we are going to accept, what we're not going to accept. What Sir Keir Starmer seems to be suggesting is that we will accept everything in the 1951 Refugee Convention. I'm not sure that's appropriate, but certainly his plans to tackle the smuggling gangs rather than to attack the migrants themselves, the victims of these gangs, is a good rhetorical start. As I've said elsewhere, I think that requires a Pied Piper, and I don't think simply setting up an agency is enough of a solution. Anyway, let's listen to Natalie Elphicke,
which tackles the criminal gangs behind the small boats crisis and saves lives. I'm delighted to be joined in Dover today by the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, and the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. And with that, I'll now hand over to Yvette.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Natalie. And it is significant to be here today with Natalie, who, as Dover's MP, has seen the consequences of dangerous boat crossings and has followed government policies in this area for many years and has concluded that Rishi Sunak's approach is not working and is supporting Labour's approach. We welcome Natalie to Labour. And we hope that across the country, people who did not vote Labour in the last election will be ready to support us this time, to deliver the change that Keir is leading and that our country so desperately needs. Dangerous boat crossings are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk. Just a few weeks ago, a 7-year-old girl was crushed to death in a smuggler boat, one of 5 people who died that day. And we've seen the sickening images of violence on the French coast as gangs push more and more people into these flimsy dinghies, gangs that are part of a network of organised criminals making hundreds of millions of pounds in profits, networks that stretch from here in the UK right across Europe through Kurdistan to the money markets of Kabul and beyond. And those networks have taken root along our borders over the last 5 years. We cannot let them get away with it. And that is why we have been working with and hearing from national security experts, border security experts, looking at the experiences of successful security operations and approaches around terrorism in the past. Why we welcome the support from former counter-terror chief Neil Basu for the work that we are doing, and why too we have drawn on Keir's experience going after terror gangs and networks as Director of Public Prosecutions and in Northern Ireland. We cannot just stand by while our border security is undermined and lives are put at risk. And instead of the years of conservative gimmicks, it is time to get a grip. So before we hear from Keir about the new proposals that Keir is setting out as leader of the Labour Party today, let me hand over now to Labour's candidate for the next election here in Dover, someone who has himself worked for the National Crime Agency and has deep experience on intelligence and cooperation to go after the criminal gangs. Welcome, Mike Tapp.
Thank you, everybody. So my name is Mike Tapp, and I am Labour's candidate for Dover, Deal and the Villages. I'm a former soldier. I've served in Afghanistan and Iraq with a specialist unit, at the National Crime Agency and then the Ministry of Defence, where I spent much of my time in counter-terrorism, playing my part to protect the British people. At the core of all these roles were three things that I believe in most: service, hard work and delivery. And that means serious policies to tackle serious problems. And that is what our leader, Keir Starmer, offers. Keir himself has experience smashing terrorist cells as the nation's chief prosecutor. That makes him the leader we need at this time. Someone who rolls up his sleeves and grips a problem. Someone who rejects the easy slogan, the cheap headline, the costly gimmick. He offers the leadership our country needs. The first duty of any government is to protect our borders. And with Keir Starmer, you have a patriot and a problem solver, someone who will get the job done. So please welcome to the stage the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, for those words. What a fantastic campaign you are running. Thank you, Natalie. It's fantastic to be in your constituency. Welcome to the Labour Party. It's so great to have you on board. And Yvette, thank you for not just your words, but all the work you've done over such a period of time on this important brief and this important challenge. And it's great to be here on a sunny day in Kent, the Garden of England. And I used to play football around here for years. The uncompromising, no-nonsense, hard-knocks training school of the Kent Boys League. So I'm very familiar with this part of the world. But after the elections last week, I have to say, it's a part of the world that the Tories are increasingly unfamiliar with. A county not just green and pleasant, but now also turning red. And by the way, on a day like this, I really am sorry that we're doing this indoors, but we'll be out there before too long. But today we are here on serious business, because this is a community on the front line of one of the gravest challenges we face as a nation. Illegal migration is a test of seriousness for all governments and would-be governments. And not just here, right across the world. A symbol, as I said in my conference speech last year, of a more volatile world, an age of insecurity. Now, it's a really hard nut to crack. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Tackling organised crime is always hard, especially across borders. Now, I know that from my work at the Crown Prosecution Service on drug smuggling or counter-terrorism operations. And let's be clear at the start. This is a criminal enterprise that we are dealing with. A business that pits nation against nation, that thrives in the grey areas of our rules, the cracks between our institutions, where they believe they can exploit some of the most vulnerable people in the world with impunity. A vile trade that preys on the desperation and the hope it finds in its victims, the common humanity that ultimately it seeks to extinguish. And not so long ago, back in 2016, I went for myself to visit the refugee camps on the outskirts of Calais. It was winter, I think it was February. It was absolutely freezing. The ground was mud, sodden with rain and human waste. And I saw children there, two in particular in my mind, who were the same age as my children. Back then, that was age 5 and age 7, huddling together in a tent that offered almost nothing in the way of warmth. A desperate situation. Then I went home and said goodnight to my children, the same age, each in their own bedroom with the central heating on. And I came away from that day profoundly depressed. And I would defy anybody to go into those camps and come away with any other reaction. That camp represented a monumental failure across nations. People had been brutally let down by governments, of course, not just in terms of the awful conditions, but also because the failure of our asylum system had encouraged a false hope, a hope that had unequivocally made those people more vulnerable to exploitation. Gangs were hovering around that camp that day when I went, using it as a job centre for modern slavery. Now, that particular camp has gone, but the smuggling business remains. The exploitation remains. The peril, as Yvette said, the children dying in our waters. Just 3 weeks ago, a 7-year-old girl, the same age as one of the children I saw in that camp. That all remains. And no matter how good anyone thinks their intentions are, turning a blind eye to this business, not understanding how important a rules-based asylum system is for tackling that exploitation, for removing the criminal business model, if you like, that is not progressive and compassionate position. It is the complete opposite of a progressive and compassionate position. This problem must be tackled. These gangs must be stopped. Our asylum system must be rebuilt. Our borders must be secured. But to do that, to finally grip this problem, we need to turn the page and move on from an unhealthy interest in gesture politics that has long defined this policy area, and which has dragged the Tories as a serious party of government onto the rocks of their own delusion. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean by gesture politics. September 2020, the Sun newspaper reports that the government is exploring the procurement of Yamaha jet skis. The plan, allegedly, to patrol the English Channel and tow boats containing asylum seekers back to France. October 2020, the Financial Times reports that the government is undertaking a secret consultation with the maritime industry. The plan this time, constructing floating walls or maritime fencing in order to block small boats, and presumably, in the busiest shipping lane in the world, all other boats. December 2020, and Yvette will remember this well. Chris Phelp, then the Immigration Minister, at the Home Affairs Select Committee in front of Yvette, refusing to rule out the use of wave machines to blow back the boats, a policy that had by then somehow managed to find its way into the newspapers. I could go on. There is plenty more material. Sound cannons, sonic weapons, various deployments of the Royal Navy against advice and with little success. The list is endless. Yet here we are. Over 8,000 people have made the perilous journey across the Channel in small boats this year, on track to surpass the record set in 2022. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not impliedly criticising the reporting here. If a government source tells you that it's going to build a wall in the English Channel, you better believe that is a story. But the question this record must raise is whether the latest gimmick, the Prime Minister's Rwanda scheme, can really be taken as a serious solution to this important challenge. I don't think so. They will get flights off the ground. I don't doubt that. But I also don't doubt that this will not work. A policy that will see just a few hundred people removed to Rwanda a year. Less than 1% of the people who cross the sea in small boats every year. Less than 1% for £600 million. That is neither an effective deterrent or a good use of your money. And then you look at the rest of our border system, and honestly, it's like a sieve. Just the other day, the Home Office admitted it's lost track of thousands of people that they think have no right to be here. And yet, still, the government refuses to do anything than focus all its time and energy propping up Rwanda, throwing good money after bad, hoping it will get a few flights with, what, a couple of hundred migrants off the ground. Because it's symbolic for party management, for the election. It's gesture politics. £600 million for a few hundred removed. That is gesture politics. And Britain can do better. Labour will do better. We will end this farce. We will restore serious government to our borders, tackle this problem at source, and replace the Rwanda policy permanently.